Somewhere in the ancient world, a civilization once believed it could reach the heavens, not through prayer, but through stone, brick, and human ambition. According to one of the most famous stories ever written, humanity attempted to build a tower so immense it would touch the sky itself. And then, suddenly, everything collapsed, not by fire or war, but by something far stranger. Language itself fractured. But was the Tower of Babel ever real? The biblical account describes a moment early in human history when all people spoke a single language. Communication was effortless, ideas spread instantly, and united by this shared voice, humanity began a project unlike anything before it, a massive tower that would rise high enough to reach the heavens. But before the structure could be completed, something extraordinary happened, something that would change the course of human history forever. According to the book of Genesis, God saw what humanity was attempting to accomplish, a unified civilization speaking one language, building a monument that symbolized collective power and ambition. The story claims that God feared nothing would be impossible for them if they remained united. So he intervened in a radical way, confusing their languages so they could no longer understand one another. In a moment, cooperation collapsed. Builders could no longer communicate with architects. Workers misunderstood instructions. Plans disintegrated into chaos. Construction halted, and the people scattered across the earth, forming separate cultures and languages. The tower was abandoned, its purpose unfinished. From that moment on, the place was called Babel, a word forever associated with confusion and the birth of linguistic diversity. For centuries, many believed this story explained the origin of the world's languages. It offered a simple answer to a complex question: why do humans speak thousands of different languages today? But modern science, archaeology, and linguistics have revealed a far more complicated reality, one that raises an even more intriguing question. What if the Tower of Babel was never meant to be literal history? To understand where the story may have come from, historians often look to one of the oldest cradles of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia. Located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, this region gave birth to some of the earliest cities on Earth. Massive urban centers emerged thousands of years ago, filled with temples, walls, markets, and towering monuments that dominated the landscape. Among the most distinctive structures built by these civilizations were ziggurats, immense stepped towers made from mud bricks and bitumen. These structures were not defensive fortresses or royal palaces. Instead, they were sacred monuments. Each level rose toward the sky in a series of terraces, symbolizing a bridge between the human worlds below and the divine realm above. At the top of these towers often stood a temple dedicated to a specific god. Priests climbed the steep stairways to perform rituals, offer sacrifices, and communicate with the divine. To ancient Mesopotamians, these structures were not merely architectural achievements, they were sacred gateways between heaven and earth. And among all the ziggurats built across the region, one tower stood above the rest. In the ancient city of Babylon, archaeologists believe there once stood a massive temple tower known as Etemenanki. Its name meant something remarkable: the temple of the foundation of heaven and earth. According to historical records, this structure may have risen more than 90 meters high, dominating the skyline of the city and serving as one of the most powerful religious symbols of the ancient world. For travelers approaching Babylon, the tower would have been impossible to ignore. Layer upon layer of ascending platforms created the illusion of a staircase climbing into the sky. To the people who lived there, it was a sacred structure. But to outsiders, especially those who later wrote the Hebrew Bible, the tower may have represented something very different, a symbol of dangerous human ambition. Babylon itself held a complicated place in biblical tradition. In many passages, the city is portrayed not as a sacred center, but as a place of arrogance and corruption. It represented imperial power, wealth, and political domination. The Tower of Babel story may therefore have been less about architecture and more about ideology, a warning about the consequences of human pride. The narrative suggests that the problem was not the tower itself, but the motivation behind it. According to Genesis, the builders said they wanted to make a name for themselves and avoid being scattered across the earth. In other words, the project was not just about reaching the sky, it was about creating a unified civilization powerful enough to challenge divine authority. This theme appears repeatedly throughout ancient mythology. Many cultures told stories about humans attempting to cross boundaries reserved for the gods. In Greek mythology, Prometheus stole fire from the heavens. In Mesopotamian myths, certain figures attempted to gain immortality. These stories often carried the same message: when humans overstep cosmic limits, consequences inevitably follow. One particularly intriguing example comes from an ancient Mesopotamian legend involving a man named Adapa. According to the myth, Adapa was offered the chance to gain eternal life by the gods, but through a misunderstanding, he refused the gift. Humanity remained mortal. Like Babel, the story revolves around a moment when humans approached the divine threshold and something went wrong. The book of Genesis contains another story built on a similar idea: Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. In that narrative, humans gained knowledge that was originally meant only for the divine. The result is exile from paradise. These stories reflect a recurring theme in ancient religious thought: the fragile boundary separating humanity from the gods. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the Tower of Babel story concerns language itself. The narrative implies that linguistic diversity appeared almost instantly. Before the tower, everyone spoke the same language. After divine intervention, thousands of languages suddenly existed. Modern linguistics, however, paints a completely different picture of how human languages actually evolve. Languages do not appear overnight. Instead, they change slowly over centuries. Words shift in meaning, pronunciations drift, new grammar rules emerge. When groups of people migrate or become isolated from one another, their language gradually transforms. After enough generations, these variations become so significant that entirely new languages emerge. Linguists have mapped these changes across thousands of years and discovered that languages form enormous family trees. English, Spanish, German, and Hindi all belong to the Indo-European language family. Other families, like Afro-Asiatic or Sino-Tibetan, have their own deep historical roots. These linguistic branches evolved gradually, much like biological species evolving from common ancestors. This scientific understanding creates a major contradiction with the biblical narrative. If language is developed slowly through cultural separation and migration, then the sudden linguistic explosion described in the Babel story cannot be literal history. Instead, it may represent something far more symbolic, a myth designed to explain a phenomenon that ancient people did not yet understand. But symbolism does not mean the story lacked real historical inspiration. Ancient writers often transformed real places and events into powerful narratives. The towering ziggurats of Mesopotamia, particularly the Great Tower of Babylon, could easily have inspired a story about humans attempting to reach the heavens. Over time, that architectural reality may have evolved into a deeper moral narrative. There is also another possibility. The Tower of Babel story may reflect ancient memories of cultural fragmentation. Early civilizations sometimes experienced sudden collapse due to war, climate change, or political upheaval. When large empires fell apart, Populations scattered and languages diverged. To later generations, this process might have seemed mysterious and abrupt. Babylon itself experienced multiple cycles of destruction and rebuilding. Invading armies, political revolutions, and environmental changes repeatedly reshaped the city. Monumental structures were constructed, abandoned, and reconstructed over centuries. A ruined tower standing in the middle of a once great city could easily become the seed of a powerful story about a project that ended in catastrophe. Ancient historians also describe Babylon as a place where many cultures met. Merchants, soldiers, diplomats, and travelers from different regions all converged there. In such an environment, dozens of languages would have been spoken simultaneously. For observers unfamiliar with this diversity, the city may have seemed like a chaotic place where communication constantly broke down. Imagine walking through the streets of such a metropolis thousands of years ago. Traders shouting in unfamiliar dialects, priests chanting sacred languages, foreign visitors negotiating deals through translators. To someone accustomed to a single local language, this overwhelming diversity might have seemed almost supernatural, like a curse placed upon humanity itself. Over time, stories evolved to explain confusing realities. The Babel narrative may have offered a simple explanation for an increasingly complex world. Instead of gradual linguistic evolution, the story proposed a single dramatic event. Instead of cultural migration, it described divine intervention. In a few powerful paragraphs, it explained why humanity was no longer united. Yet, the deeper meaning of the story may lie elsewhere. Many scholars believe the Tower of Babel narrative was designed to explore the relationship between power and humility. When humans unite behind ambition alone, the story suggests, they risk losing sight of their limits. The tower becomes a metaphor for civilizations that grow too confident in their own abilities. This interpretation becomes especially compelling when viewed through the lens of ancient imperial politics. Babylon was one of the most powerful empires of its time. Its monuments, armies, and wealth symbolized dominance over vast territories. For the authors of the Hebrew Bible, portraying Babylon as the birthplace of human arrogance carried a strong political message. Instead of glorifying the empire's achievements, the Babel story transforms its greatest monument into a warning. The tower is not celebrated as a triumph of engineering. It becomes a cautionary tale about pride, unity without wisdom, and the fragile balance between human ambition and cosmic order. And yet, the irony is impossible to ignore. Humanity did not stop building towers. Across history, civilizations continued constructing monuments that reached higher and higher into the sky: cathedrals, skyscrapers, observatories, space rockets. The desire to reach beyond our limits appears to be deeply embedded within human nature. Today, we no longer try to reach heaven through brick towers. Instead, we launch satellites and spacecraft into orbit, extending our presence beyond the atmosphere itself. The ancient dream of touching the sky has simply taken new forms. Technology has replaced stone, but the ambition remains strikingly familiar. In this sense, the Tower of Babel may reflect something timeless about humanity. It captures the tension between curiosity and caution, progress and humility. Every generation faces the same question that echoes through the ancient story. How far should human ambition go before it risks crossing unseen boundaries? Whether the tower ever existed exactly as described may ultimately be less important than the questions it raises. Why do civilizations strive to surpass their limits? Why does language divide us even as communication connects us? And why do so many ancient cultures tell stories about the dangers of reaching too high? The ruins of Babylon still exist today, scattered across the deserts of modern Iraq. Archaeologists continue studying fragments of walls, temples, and foundations that once formed one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. Somewhere among those ruins may lie the remnants of the structure that inspired the legend. But the true Tower of Babel may never have been a single building at all. It may be an idea, a reflection of humanity's endless attempt to understand the world, overcome division, and reach beyond what seems possible. And perhaps that is why the story has survived for thousands of years, still whispering the same mysterious question: what happens when humanity tries to reach the heavens?